what if the real frontier in fighting cancer isn't just about, developing brand new drugs? What if it's more about unlocking and maybe empowering the incredible defense systems that are already hardwired into your body?
That's a really compelling way to look at it, isn't it? The idea that maybe our most powerful weapon is something we're actually born with, just waiting to be fully understood.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the core of what we're diving into today. We're going to explore how your body has these sophisticated systems constantly working to keep you healthy.
Right.
And how specific foods can actually support those natural defenses, and how cutting-edge science is now learning to work with these innate abilities in some pretty revolutionary ways.
Yeah, and we're drawing heavily today on insights from an expert, Dr. DrWilliamli, bringing together his perspective from, both clinical practice and some really groundbreaking research.
So think of this as distilling some key findings that could genuinely change how you think about cancer and, your own health.
Our mission really is to pull out those surprising facts
can go
and
from stage 4 cancer,
the really actionable bits of knowledge, stuff that shines a light on this internal war your body is constantly fighting against potential cancers.
And most importantly, how you might be able to help tip the scales a bit in your favor.
Okay, so let's jump right in with something pretty mind-blowing from the source material.
Please do. Lay it on us.
Well, okay, consider this. Every single day, your body makes an estimated 10,000 errors, 10,000 microscopic mistakes or mutations that could potentially turn into cancer.
10,000 a day?
Yeah.
That number alone is,
wow.
It's staggering. If that's happening constantly, why aren't we just, constantly getting cancer? Why isn't everyone riddled with it?
And that's the critical point the source really emphasizes. The reason is those sophisticated, hardwired health defense systems you mentioned earlier, they are continuously active, patrolling your body like, think of it like a vigilant police force in a neighborhood. They're spotting these abnormal cells, these tiny microscopic precancers, and just eliminating them before they can ever become a problem.
Cleaning up those 10,000 daily mistakes.
Exactly.
And it involves your immune system. And some of the remarkable scientific breakthroughs are teaching us that our body heals itself against diseases as serious as cancer in ways that the pharmaceutical industry can't by itself do, but it really relies on the body. So when you talk about
that police
food
cruiser analogy
as medicine
really helps.
or medicine
it sort
as
of explains that when we talk about cancer as a diagnosed disease, like a tumor you can actually find, we're talking about a situation where, for whatever reason, those natural defenses maybe didn't catch all the microscopic threats, some slipped through the net and started to grow.
And the scale of that growth is just, it's wild. The source mentions the smallest breast cancer a doctor can typically feel during an exam. It's about 1 centimeter across.
Okay, 1 centimeter. Seems small.
But that little lump already contains about 1 billion cancer cells. It's multiplied 1 billion times from that initial microscopic mistake.
1 billion times. Wow. It really highlights how much has kind of gone wrong by the time it's something you can actually detect from the outside. So, okay, let's look at some of these specific defense systems the source highlights. The first one is something we hear a lot about, the immune system.
Right, and we mostly think of it fighting off, cold and flu infections. But its internal surveillance role, hunting for these rogue cells, is just as vital.
And what's fascinating is how new research is linking this natural defense system to modern treatments like immunotherapy, specifically those checkpoint inhibitors.
Ah, yes, checkpoint inhibitors, those treatments that have been really revolutionary for some patients.
Yeah.
They basically take the brakes off your immune system.
Exactly, letting it recognize and attack cancer cells it previously just ignored.
And a study highlighted in the source, looking at 100 people getting these checkpoint inhibitors for various cancers, had just an incredible finding.
Okay.
They compared the people who responded really well to the treatment against those who, didn't do so well. They looked at everything: age, gender, other health issues, even their genetic makeup. And there was no significant difference between the responders and non-responders, except for one single thing.
Okay, this sounds like the punchline to some scientific mystery.
Yeah.
What was the one thing?
The presence of a specific type of beneficial bacteria in their gut, Acromancia muciniphila.
Acromancia.
Yeah. The patients who responded well to the immunotherapy, they generally had this bacteria. and the non-responders generally did not.
That is genuinely surprising. So something living in your gut could actually determine if a super cutting-edge cancer drug works for you.
It gets even more compelling. So researchers took Acromancia from the human responders, and they actually put it into mice that weren't responding to immunotherapy.
Okay.
And just introducing this one bacteria resurrected the mice's immune response. It enabled them to effectively fight and kill their cancers.
Wow.
It strongly suggests this specific gut microbe is incredibly important, maybe even vital, for certain immunotherapies to actually work properly in some people.
So the obvious question then is, how do you get this seemingly magic bacteria?
Yeah.
You mentioned at the time of the research, Acromancia wasn't commonly available as like a probiotic pill.
Right, not really. So the next logical step was, okay, how can you grow more of it in your own gut? Using food.
Makes sense. Feed the good guys already there.
Precisely. And the source points to specific foods that act as prebiotics, basically food for Acromancia, helping it flourish if it's already present.
What kind of foods?
Things like pomegranate, the juice or the seeds, cranberries, both the juice and dried ones, Concord grape juice, or just the grapes themselves.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, chili peppers, and also Chinese black vinegar, like that tangy stuff you sometimes get for dipping soup dumplings in.
Chili peppers and black vinegar. Who knew? Okay, that's a fascinating link between gut bacteria, food, and immunotherapy. What's the next major defense system the source explores?
Another really critical one is angiogenesis. Now, this is the body's complex system for controlling the growth and distribution of blood vessels.
Right, our circulation system. And it's immense, isn't it? Something like 60,000 miles of blood vessels in an adult body, constantly delivering oxygen and nutrients everywhere.
It's just a vast network, and normally the body is incredibly smart about where it lets new blood vessels grow. It directs supply to healthy tissue and actively stops growth where it's not needed, like around tiny clusters of abnormal cells.
So it's like the body's own traffic control system for blood flow, preventing detours to places they shouldn't go. Like, no exit here for you, tumor.
Exactly. But cancers are, well, they're masters of subversion. As a tumor grows, it learns to hijack this system. It starts sending out signals to recruit blood vessels from the nearby healthy tissue to feed itself.
It basically reroutes your own supply lines for its own benefit, steals the groceries.
Pretty much. And the impact is just dramatic. The source mentions that the moment a single blood vessel manages to touch a tiny microscopic tumor, that tumor can just explode in size, growing something like 16,000 times bigger in just 2 weeks.
16,000 times from one vessel.
Yeah. And remember that 1 centimeter tumor we talked about? The one with 1 billion cells. It's not fed by one vessel. It's fed by an estimated 100 million blood vessels coursing into it.
100 million? That's hard to even picture. It really underscores how critical that blood supply is for the tumor's survival and growth.
Absolutely. But the good news is, just like with the immune system, we can support our body's natural anti-angiogenesis defense, the system that tries to stop this.
How? By eating foods that contain compounds that help control that blood vessel growth, essentially helping to starve potential microscopic cancers by cutting off their supply line before they get big.
That's the idea. The source highlights several foods with these anti-angiogenic properties. Coffee and tea, for example, are mentioned as containing natural substances that can help regulate blood vessel growth.
Okay, coffee and tea are staples for many people. Anything surprising there?
There is, actually. Research often just assumed green tea was the front runner for supporting these blood vessel defenses because of its general health reputation.
All right, you hear a lot about green tea.
But the lab data mentioned in the source actually showed that English tea, specifically Earl Grey, was the most potent in their tests.
Earl Grey? Seriously, that's unexpected. Any idea why?
Well, the speculation is that the unique combination of bergamot oil, that's what gives Earl Grey its distinctive flavor, combined with the compounds naturally in black tea, might create a kind of synergistic effect, makes it particularly powerful in this specific regard.
It's a great example of how sometimes the answers aren't where you might expect them.
Totally.
No.
And sticking with tea for a moment, matcha is also specifically called out.
Ah, matcha, that vibrant green powder.
Yes, and it's described as kind of super enriched. Because you're consuming the entire ground tea leaf, not just steeping it, you get significantly higher concentrations of beneficial plant compounds like polyphenols.
Right, those powerful antioxidants and anti-inflammatories.
Exactly. Plus, you get dietary fiber that way too, which you don't get from steeped tea.
And that fiber is great for gut health and metabolism, which ties back into overall health, doesn't it?
It all connects. And lab studies mentioned in the source specifically show that the polyphenols concentrated in matcha can actually kill breast cancer stem cells.
Cancer stem cells?
Yeah.
Okay, those are the really tricky ones, aren't they? The ones deep within a tumor that are often resistant to treatment and can cause the cancer to come back later.
Precisely. Targeting them is seen as crucial for preventing recurrence. And matcha isn't the only food mentioned that shows promise against these cancer stem cells.
Oh, what else did they find?
Dark purple potatoes, you know, the ones that are deep purple all the way through, not just the skin. They contain compounds called anthocyanins, another type of powerful plant pigment. And a Penn State lab study mentioned demonstrated that extracts from these purple potatoes could kill colon cancer stem cells in the lab.
Purple potatoes killing colon cancer stem cells. Earl Grey tea being more potent than green tea for blood vessel control. These are exactly the kind of surprising facts that can make you rethink your grocery list. Okay, so we've covered the immune system, controlling angiogenesis, and foods that support them. What's the third major factor highlighted in the source that impacts our risk?
This one is really crucial and maybe often overlooked. Excess body fat, particularly what's known as visceral fat.
Visceral fat. That's the internal kind, right? Not just stuff under the skin.
Exactly. It's the fat that accumulates deep within your abdomen, surrounding your vital organs. Sometimes it's called skinny fat, because even people who look quite thin on the outside can actually have dangerous levels of it internally.
And why is that visceral fat so dangerous? It's clearly not just about appearance.
Not at all. The source explains that visceral fat creates a highly inflammatory environment throughout the body's core. And inflammation. Well, it's like fuel for cancer.
Right. The analogy used was like pouring gasoline on smoldering embers.
That's a perfect way to put it. If you have those microscopic cancers or tiny precancerous growths hanging around, remember those 10,000 daily mistakes? Putting them in an inflammatory environment, like the one created by excess visceral fat, can be the trigger, the thing that makes them ignite and grow rapidly into full-blown tumors.
And the data on this is pretty stark, isn't it?
It really is. A Cornell study mentioned in the source, which followed normal-sized Swedish women for 13 years. They used specialized scans to measure their internal body fat.
Okay.
And they found that the women who were of normal weight but had excess visceral fat had a 3-fold increase in the risk of developing breast cancer compared to normal weight women who didn't have that excess internal fat.
3 times the risk. Even if they weren't outwardly overweight, that's a massive difference.
It really underscores that health isn't just about the number on the scale, you know, and the link isn't just to breast cancer. Excess visceral fat has been connected to an increased risk of 14 other types of cancer.
14?
Yeah, including common ones like colon, ovarian, lung, and prostate cancers.
Wow. Okay, the source used some quite vivid analogies to help understand why this visceral fat is so dangerous internally. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. One was picturing your body's torso, like a suitcase, and your organs are like neatly packed clothes inside.
Okay.
Visceral fat grows between organs. It's like packing leaky cream canisters into that suitcase amongst the clothes. As those canisters grow and leak,
They press on everything, the clothes, and spread inflammation, the leaking cream, throughout that whole core space.
exactly. The inflammation isn't just localized, it's sort of leaking everywhere within the body's central suitcase.
That makes it much clearer than just saying inflammation.
Right. And another related point is that the fat tissue itself can grow so quickly that it actually outgrows its own blood supply. It becomes hypoxic, basically, starved for oxygen.
Okay, so the fat itself is unhealthy.
Yes. And that state attracts inflammatory cells into the fat tissue itself, turning the fat into a chronic source of inflammation that then spills out into the rest of the body.
These analogies really make the abstract concept of inflammation much more tangible and, frankly, alarming. So, okay, when we bring all this together, empowering the immune system, controlling blood vessel growth, reducing inflammation from things like excess visceral fat, these are powerful ways we can support our body's built-in ability to fight off those microscopic cancers and lower our overall risk.
It really is about working with your inherent biology, not just waiting for disease to strike and then trying to react. And this growing understanding of the body's own power is leading to some incredibly exciting frontiers in cancer treatment itself, especially using advanced technology to personalize the fight.
Right, this is where it feels like we're really stepping into the future. The source describes a process that sounds almost like something out of science fiction.
It kind of does. So imagine taking a sample of someone's tumor and meticulously sequencing all its genes, finding every single genetic mistake, every typo that makes it different from a normal, healthy cell.
Okay, so you map the tumor's blueprint.
And then, crucially, you also sequence the genes from the person's normal cells. So you have both lists.
The wanted genes from the tumor and the innocent bystander genes from the normal cells.
Exactly. And this is where the tech comes in. Using sophisticated AI and machine learning, you compare the two lists. You basically subtract out everything found in the normal cells, leaving behind only the mutations that are truly unique to that specific person's unique cancer. These are the real smoking guns, the specific genetic changes that drove their disease.
It's like in that movie, Minority Report, where they isolate the key elements on the screen. You're identifying the specific doers for this individual cancer.
Precisely that idea. And then you take these identified smoking gun mutations, almost like stringing them together like pearls on a necklace, creating a unique signature, a sort of most wanted poster for that individual's cancer.
Okay, so you've identified the exact enemy, the specific targets. How do you then use that information?
This is the really revolutionary part. Using advanced biotechnology, sometimes called a protein printer, you can actually create proteins that correspond exactly to those unique smoking gun mutations you just identified.
You literally print the most wanted protein.
You do. And then you inject small amounts of that protein under the person's skin. It acts as a type of personalized peptide vaccine.
A vaccine.
Against their own cancer.
In effect, yes. You are showing the person's own immune system exactly what its specific cancer looks like at a molecular level. You're training it, teaching it to recognize those unique proteins as the enemy it needs to find and destroy. So you're not introducing a drug to kill the cancer, you're training their body's existing defense system to do the job, but with much better targeting.
Exactly. You're leveraging the body's own power, but giving it a highly specific, personalized target. And there's evidence this approach is showing some truly amazing results in clinical trials. Yeah, the source mentions a study published in Nature Communications. It looked at over 100 patients with glioblastoma, which is an incredibly aggressive and difficult to treat brain cancer, often seen as, game over.
Glioblastoma, yeah, that is one of the toughest cancers there is. A really grim diagnosis usually.
It absolutely is. But with this type of personalized vaccine approach, some of those patients were kept alive and, remarkably, cancer-free. Kept cancer-free by their own immune systems that had been trained to fight their specific tumor.
That's incredible.
Now, this isn't a cure for everyone yet. It's still evolving, but it represents a significant step. It shows a shift from what was considered essentially impossible just a few years ago to now being seen as possible.
That shift from impossible to possible, powered by the body's own systems, that really feels like the core message, doesn't it? It seems the end of cancer, or at least dramatically changing the landscape, is coming from this blend.
Yeah, it's about understanding the body's incredibly powerful natural defense systems first.
Then supporting them through lifestyle choices, like the foods we eat.
And then using this cutting-edge technology to personalize and amplify those innate abilities.
It's a synergy, really. Biology, diet, lifestyle, and technological innovation, all pointing towards empowering the individual's own fight.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've explored how your body is constantly neutralizing potential cancers every single day. Those 10,000 little mistakes.
Right, the baseline defense.
We've seen how specific foods, from pomegranate and surprisingly Earl Grey tea to things like purple potatoes, can actively support crucial defenses like your immunity and your body's control over blood vessel growth.
Feeding the defenses, starving the potential problems.
We've highlighted the really surprising and significant danger of inflammation coming from excess visceral fat, even in people who might look thin, that skinny fat danger.
A hidden risk factor, definitely.
And finally, we've looked at this truly cutting-edge technology that can map your unique cancer and literally train your own immune system to hunt it down and fight it.
It's powerfully clear, I think, that there's no single magic bullet here. The real promise seems to lie in understanding and harnessing the body's inherent capabilities.
Supporting them through lifestyle, like diet and exercise.
And then using science to make those natural defenses even more precise and effective.
Which kind of leaves us with this thought to ponder, maybe for you listening. If the body's own defense systems are so incredibly sophisticated and powerful, perhaps even more potent in some ways than pharmaceuticals alone, what vast untapped potential still lies within us, waiting to be fully understood and unleashed, not just against cancer, but perhaps against other diseases too.
And what is that possibility, the one we touched on with the glioblastoma trial? The possibility of seeing a patient potentially go from a stage 4 diagnosis, which once really did mean game over, to a state of no evidence of disease, maybe even effectively stage 0. What does that mean for how we fundamentally think about health, about healing, and about the truly remarkable capacity of the human body?